balance. And today, the Trump team in Nevada filed a lawsuit into alleged electoral fraud there. It's just one of several lawsuits already filed, and many more are expected to come. Well, joining me now from Florida is Jesse Panuccio, former acting United States Associate Attorney General in the Trump administration. And we've got Dylan Loewe, former Joe Biden chief speechwriter. Very good to talk to you both. Well, let's start with you, Mr. Panuccio. Do you think any of these lawsuits have a real chance of success? And more importantly, a real chance of changing the outcome of this election?
Well, thanks for having me. Good afternoon, good evening. Lawsuits and litigation are quite common, or litigation around elections is quite common. Whether they have a chance of changing an election really depends on changing the result, really depends on the margins. If these states are close, then either way, I think you'll see litigation. If the president ends up winning, for example, Georgia by a very thin margin, I think you can expect to see litigation from the Biden campaign. It all depends on whether it will have an effect on the outcome. And whether it will change the outcome depends on the claims that are made. If there are votes that shouldn't have been counted and were, then that could change the outcome. Or if there are votes that weren't counted and should have been, that could change the outcome as well. So we really have to see what develops over the next several hours and days.
So from the Democratic point of view, Dylan Loewe, the urgency is to keep the vote counting going on, and any legal action from that side is pointing at that. Just keep counting those votes, get the scores on the board.
Yeah, and look, I don't think that's just a Democratic view. I think that's a view, an American view, a view of those who stand for democracy itself. Obviously, we want all the votes to count. And I would just disagree with your other guest to the extent that, sure, there may be litigation, but litigation is not dependent on margins. It's dependent on evidence. The reason these court cases have already been thrown out is there is no evidence of the widespread voter fraud that Trump claims. Feeling bad that you're losing isn't evidence that there's fraud. It's just evidence that you're a loser. And I think within the next 8 to 24 hours, we're going to find out that Donald Trump is only the fourth president in American history to lose after just one term.
Is that it, Jesse Panuccio? The president is behind. Well, he sometimes calls himself that as well. The president is behind, and this is a sign of that, putting in all these legal challenges.
Well, as far as I know, the votes are still being counted in Arizona and Nevada and Pennsylvania and North Carolina and in Georgia. So it's a bit premature for representatives of the Biden campaign to be declaring victory and saying that those voters shouldn't have their say. My only point is, if these states come down to razor-thin margins, you can expect there to be litigation. There always is. Whether that litigation will be valid or not will depend on the claims that are made. But let's take Pennsylvania, for example. Here you had a state Supreme Court that made up rules at the last minute, overriding the state legislature in violation of the U.S. Constitution. If it comes down to Pennsylvania, that is a claim that the U.S. Supreme Court punted on. You had 3 justices write an opinion that said it could well be a valid claim. It's unfortunate that they punted and didn't give certainty in advance. But if it comes to Pennsylvania, we have a very serious case there.
OK, sorry to cut you off there. Nearly out of time, so I've got to give the last section to Dylan Loewe. Just that point on Pennsylvania.
I think we're only a few hours away from seeing Donald Trump's small margin in Pennsylvania evaporate. Most of the votes, if not almost all of the votes outstanding, are mail-in ballots from Democrats that are at this point showing Biden winning by an 80-20 margin. Our expectation is that when all is said and done, Biden is going to win Pennsylvania by well over 100,000 votes. And any professation of the changes to election law being unconstitutional and ridiculous, and the idea that anything from a litigation perspective is going to change the outcome is small. The only person who is suggesting that we not count all the votes is Donald Trump and his allies. And I think it's silly to suggest that that is what I'm suggesting here. I'm saying once all the votes are counted, it's going to be very clear that Biden is the winner.
OK, sorry to squeeze you, Dylan Loewe, Jesse Panuccio. That was tight. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up.